Hello, everybody. We're going to start our weekly meeting today, talking about donor area, talking about FUE, adjustments of the punch, and the histology knowledge, and how to apply all this knowledge on a daily basis on our patient surgeries, because a good hair transplant surgeon has the ability to manage the donor area in a way that you have to think about the future surgeries that your patient will probably need, and we have to understand how to perform that in a way that we don't damage. Here we see a patient that we did 3,000 hair follicles extraction in a very precise ways, in a way that we don't need to do excessive holes. We did small holes, and this is the goal. So how we can perform this donor management without damaging the donor area, and how can we perform this? There are many knowledge that we gotta have to perform a good donor harvesting, and the punch adjustment is one of the crucial part of the surgery. Here we see the small holes made by the punch. In this patient, we did a FUE, manual FUE extraction with 0.8 and 0.9 punch diameter. So what we have to know in the theory and how to apply that in our practice. We have this terminology that is standardization from the International Society of Hair Restoration Surgery, that it describes how we give the name to the structures that we and the device, and make a uniform naming for the FUE that we talking about. It's just like the nomina anatomica that we have in anatomy. We have this standardization of terminology. So we have now in 2019 the changing of the name of the FUE, that is no longer follicular unit extraction. We call it now follicular unit excision. And this means that we have to do an incision and after an extraction. So we do an excision with a sharpen or a punch, and the extraction, we can make it with tweezers, gauze, or suction. So the goal of the FUE is to incise and extract, to disconnect the follicular unit from the anchor system that fixes the follicular unit to the skin and the adipose tissue below the dermis. So what is the anchor system of the follicular unit? The anchor system is comprised by the structures that fix the follicular unit in the skin and tissue, adipose tissue. And these fixations, this is made by structures just like the sebaceous gland, the erector pili muscle, the dermis insertions of the follicular unit, and we have also some connections from the eccrine glands, and connections between the adipose tissues and the dermis sheath around the hair follicles. So we have, when we perform the FUE incision and extraction, we have to disconnect all this anchor system from the follicular unit to be able to extract it properly. So here we see this paper from Dr. Poblev, where he describes the connections from the eccrine glands. And we can see it just below the sebaceous gland. And it's an important thing to consider when we have to adjust the depth of the punch. And in this book, Dr. J. Park, he defines how to set the punching depth. So in a way that we don't be too superficial and we don't become too deep. Because if we are too superficial, we can cause capping or plucking. And if we put the punch too deep, we can increase the transaction rates. So there is a safer depth to look for when adjusting the depth of the punch. So if you do the incision with the punch too superficial in a partial part of the dermis, you can cause the capping because it's too superficial, the depth of the punch. If you go all the way through the dermis, you have a minimal excision depth. But the ideal depth is to adjust the punch just below the sebaceous glands depth limit. If you go under this depth, you may increase the risk of transection. So here we can see different types of hair follicles, and there is a difference. And here we apply the knowledge of that, of the terminology. Here we can see a difference between two follicular units, and the terminology calls this difference display, where in our right side we can see the divergence of the hair follicles, where when we find this in Afro hair descendant. So when you have the upper part of the hair follicle that is inside of the dermis, and we call it the permanent part, that does not change throughout the hair follicle cycle, you have a straighter part of the hair follicle. So in this area, we can use the punch, the straight punch, to incise the skin and disconnect all those structures. But if you go deeper with the punch, you can damage and cause a transection. So we adjust the punch when we have this splay. We have to adjust the punch in the depth of the straight part. And when you see display, we should not advance the punch deeper. So after that, we have to do the proper handling of the hair follicle to extract with tweezers, gauze, or suction. So how do we adjust the punch? We incise the hair follicle with the punch in this distance, this depth, where we go until the sebaceous and even the eccrine glands. And below that, we should not put the punch too deep in a way to avoid the transection. Here in the display, hair follicle in this display, it's easier to understand why we should not go deeper, because we can size this part of the dermis and the sebaceous gland that is straighter, and below that we should extract, not incise. Here we see this sequence of hair incisions with a manual FUE. This is a curly hair from a Afro-descendant patient. And the depth is adjusted to go until display occurs. So and I'd like to show this, that there's a paper that also describes that when you have a good incision, the hair follicles pops up 1 millimeter above the skin. And after we do the incision, we can perform the extraction with tweezers. If the connections of the anchor system is well removed, we can use one movement, one stage tweezer extraction, but it's important to grab and the sebaceous gland that is a good landmark, that is a firm structure. It's the stronger part of the anchor system, and we should grab there to remove using one stage extraction. But when when we have a hair follicle that is not that released, it's not too well released, we can use the three stage grabbing. We start grabbing the hair shaft. We grab just below the sebaceous gland with the second tweezer, and with the third step with the other tweezer, we just grab below the second tweezer and we remove it outside of the hair follicle incision. And when you have a good detachment, you can also use this maneuver described by Dr. Sansuyuma, when you can do a sweep up motion to remove the hair follicles. So this is a way that we show. I would like to share with you the right way, the best way to connect the theoretical knowledge with the practical applied knowledge, using the punch in the rat depth to remove hair follicles without lesions, without transections, and not making enough or unnecessary damage to the donor area. So we gotta be just like a sniper. We have to, every shot, you have to hit your target. So every incision and extraction, we should remove a hair follicle, an intact hair follicle. That is the goal of a good hair, of a good donor management. So thank you guys for watching. And if you have any questions, please let me know. We're open to answers, to questions. So thank you, thank you. Nobody's asking English, just the Brazilian guys. Thank you for your answers, your questions.